Okay, what else is out?
Okay, The Innocents, which we were talking about before in relation to, horror and how one would define it. This is the new film by Eskil Vogt, who wrote and directed the psychodrama Blind, perhaps best known as regular collaborator of Joachim Trier, with who most recently worked on The Worst Person in the World, wrote the script for The Worst Person in the World, and before that, Thelma, to which this is actually thematically related. So, Thelma was a film about a young college student whose sort of emotional awakening seems to trigger telekinetic powers. So it kind of had, hints of Carrie in it. This is a tale of younger kids, 7 to 11, who are similarly gifted, but in ways that are sort of very, very subtly implied, at least at first. The story centers around 4 children, between 7 and 11, pardon me for hitting the microphone, who live on the same housing estate in Norway. 2 of them are sisters, Anna Ida. The former has non-verbal autism. The latter seems to resent having to look after her older sister, particularly when she meets Ben, who's a young boy who offers to show her something exciting. And he takes her off into the woods and he shows her that he apparently has the ability to move very small objects with his mind. So drop a bottle top, he can knock it out, She goes, how do you do that? And he says, well, you just concentrate on it. And it then seems that perhaps this is a power that she could learn as well. But it's all very, very understated, very, very sort of low-key stuff. Meanwhile, her sister, who she has left alone in a park, meets Aisha, and the two form a bond. And the sister who formerly had non-verbal autism begins to speak, begins to say single words at first, but clearly, is on the cusp of speaking again. And somehow it seems that all 4 of these characters are joined and that their powers are increased when they are together. But they don't have to be physically together because they appear to be mentally joined. And then the drama is really about how that power, if it exists, maybe it's not, maybe it's in all their imagination, how each one of them responds to it and what each one of them does with it. So the English language title of this, The Innocents, obviously kind of evokes the film adaptation of Turn of the Screw, and Henry James's Turn of the Screw is the great scary children novel in which it's not really the children, it's the fears of the adults being projected onto the children. There's also in this an echo of Village of the Damned, the Wolf Thriller film of the John Wyndham novel, The Midwich Cuckoos, because the idea of a group of children who apparently, when together, are connected mentally and can affect the actions of other people through many. This is, I don't think you're going to go to London.
I was just thinking that very same thing.
There is a hint of that in the background. And it also reminded me at times of that very chilling Austrian psychodrama, Goodnight Mummy. And actually more recently, that film, John and the Hole, in its depiction of the affectlessness of youth. There's an early scene in which we see 2 of the young kids experimenting with a cat in a way that is that kind of bizarre cruelty of youth that does not yet understand right and wrong. And did you ever see that film, The Sailor Who Fell from Grace with the Sea?
What do you think?
Actually, I thought you might have done because it was out in the 70s and it was a bit of a cause célèbre, but the answer is no. Okay. It's... How to describe this? There is a moment in life when you haven't yet figured out what's right and what's wrong. You haven't learnt moral codes. And that's kind of what the film is about. And this very disturbing scene, often people talk about any childhood examples of cruelty to animals is some kind of precursor to something terrible in later life. But there's also something else going on there, which is to do with affectlessness. Now, so on one level, you could say this is like a version of the X-Men movies. It's about young people who have powers, and often misfit people who have powers. But it isn't. Its focus is that secretive world of children as they attempt to make sense of a world in which, when you're young, everything is huge, everything is grand scale, and yet it's actually happening in a very kind of confined area. Eskil Vogt says, and I'm quoting, "I think kids are beyond good and evil rather before good and evil." This is interesting because, of course, this is kind of, beyond good and evil is the, Nietzsche, he does not, He who fights monsters should see to it that he does not in the process become monstrous. And when you look long into an abyss, the abyss also looks back into you.
Ah, I thought that was Werner.
Well, it's Werner, but it's
Werner via Nietzsche.
Anyway, but beyond good and evil, because I think the word in the original language of beyond good and evil is I can't. The word looks like against sides. It means without reference to. It means like beyond the scope of. Vogt goes on to say, I don't think children are little angels, that people are born pure. I think children are born without any sense of empathy or morals, and we have to teach them that. And Vogt cites Spirit of the Beehive, which of course is a film that Guillermo del Toro goes back to time and time again as a kind of touchstone of what you can do with a cast built largely around child actors. And I thought this was really affecting because what this is a story about a group of kids in that moment of learning what the world is about. On the subject of whether or not it's a horror film, this is a lovely quote by Vogt. I'm sorry, I will read you all of this because it speaks to me. I'm a big horror fan. I'm a little offended by the label of elevated genre because I don't think it's a genre that needs elevating. There are so many interesting pure horror films. If people say I've made a horror film, I feel that's a compliment because I wanted it to be scary. But then goes on to say that, as a filmmaker, there's a whole lot of other things going on. But I really love the fact that that is somebody embracing the label of horror. So it may not automatically look like a horror film. It should not be referred to as elevated horror because the filmmaker themselves say that they would take it as a compliment if it were to be a horror film. It's really good.
Okay. Oh, you loved it. Okay.
I really did. Well, sorry, was that not clear?
I wonder. Well,
you wondered where it was going.
There's the denouement.
Okay. It's in cinemas and on digital platforms.